Oh, I'm stereo. Very good. Stereos. Excellencies and distinguished representatives of the permanent missions based in Geneva and colleagues joining us online, good morning, good afternoon, and also good evening, depending on where you are. Distinguished representatives of the parties, as well as observers, and of course, other attendees as well. A good morning to you, and thank you for joining us today. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to this briefing on the outcomes of the 2025 meetings of the Conference of the Parties to the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions. I want to begin first by expressing my sincere appreciation for the vital role you and your governments played in the success of this year's meetings, whether through active participation in the negotiations, coordination with capitals, or facilitating decisions at the high levels, or even engaging in our side events as well as in our high-level segment and also in the many events around the fair. The 2025 meetings of the Conference of the Parties were a clear demonstration of the international community's global commitment to strengthening the environmentally sound management of chemicals and wastes. Around the world, communities are increasingly affected by the impacts of pollution caused by hazardous chemicals and wastes. These are the challenges that transcend borders, and the outcomes of the 2025 COPs meetings reflect the international community's strong resolve and commitment to act decisively and also cooperatively. Allow me, before we get into the presentations, to highlight just a few of the key outcomes. The Conference of the Parties agreed to strengthen the Basel Convention and its implementation by adopting a new strategic framework for its implementation and recommendations to improve the prior informed consent procedure, with a range of recommendations as well to strengthen the implementation and compliance with the obligations under the Convention. Also, after 6 years of negotiations, the Conference of the Parties also adopted a revised Annex 4, providing enhanced legal clarity as to what is defined as waste under the Convention with a view to improving its environmental controls. The Conference of the Parties also adopted a number of decisions to improve the environmentally sound management of different waste streams, including by progressing its work on technical guidelines. E-waste, plastic waste, POPs waste, waste batteries, mercury wastes, waste pneumatic tires, and now used textiles and textiles waste will be the focus of attention in the intersessional period. Under the Rotterdam Convention, the Conference of the Parties included carbosulfan as a pesticide and phantan as a severely hazardous pesticide formulation under Annex 3. Thus enable countries to better protect human health and the environment by enabling them to take informed decisions on the import of these chemicals. Parties also initiated a number of activities aimed at continuing to enhance the effectiveness of the Convention and agreed on the work program of the Compliance Committee for the coming biennium. Finally, under the Stockholm Convention, the Conference of the Parties also agreed to list chlorpyrifos, which is a pesticide, and two complex groups of industrial chemicals. The first one being long-chain perfluorocarboxylic acids, and the second one, medium-chain chlorinated paraffins, in Annex A to the Convention, thus accelerating the global phase-out of some of the most harmful substances still currently in use. The Conference of the Parties also adopted an inaugural work program for the newly established Compliance Committee and agreed to submit the funding needs for the implementation of the Convention in the 2026 to 2030, together with other guidance, especially to the GEF Global Environment Facility, GEF 9 replenishment process. Equally important are the cross-cutting decisions aimed at strengthening the implementation of the three conventions, which, as you know, is functioning under the one secretariat. These include, among others, enhanced technical assistance and capacity building, cooperation with other entities, as well as mobilization of resources and the convention's budgets and programs of work for the biennium 2026-2027. The conferences of the parties also featured a high-level segment from ministers from around the world expressing strong support for addressing pollution as one of the triple planetary crises of pollution, biodiversity, and climate change, and for eliminating persistent organic pollutants, aligning the chemicals and waste management with both the climate as well as the biodiversity goals, for strengthening legal frameworks, reducing illegal traffic, and also promoting regulatory tools such as the extended producer responsibility. Excellencies and colleagues, the work ahead in translating the COP decisions into national policy and legislation, which we call action, relies on your continued leadership and coordination. Today's briefing is designed to help you and your respective governments to take stock of these outcomes and together with the Secretariat to begin translating them into concrete national actions and of course with global benefits. Your continued engagement as permanent missions and official contact points will be key in this next phase, whether through engaging with national stakeholders, supporting legislative updates, or working with the Secretariat, our network of regional centers, and other implementing partners in meeting your commitments under the three conventions. Let me thank you once again for your presence and for your unwavering commitment to the objectives of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions. I look forward to a productive discussion and also continuing to work closely with all of you as we move forward until the next COPs in 2027. I thank you. So with those opening remarks, I would now like to invite Ms. Juliette Kohler, who's the head of the governance branch, to present the outcomes of the BRS COPs in more detail. Thank you. Over to you, Juliette.
Thank you very much, Rolf. And I'll be making part of the presentation and be complemented by Maria Cristina, my colleague, when it comes to the outcomes of the high-level segment. So we had 2 wonderful weeks of conferences of the parties that took place between the 28th of April and the 9th of May 2025 in Geneva, with over 2,000 participants that joined us, representing 182 parties and 205 observer entities. Regarding the parties, I wanted to acknowledge with appreciation our donors, Canada, China, Finland, Germany, Japan, Kingdom of the Netherlands, Norway, and Switzerland, who graciously contributed financial resources to allow the participation of parties from developing countries and countries with economies in transition. The theme of the meetings was Make Visible the Invisible, Sound Management of Chemicals and Wastes. In terms of outcomes, if we want some numbers, 56 decisions were adopted by the 3 conferences of the parties together, including 8 on joint issues. And these all aim to advance the sound management of chemicals and wastes. There was a high-level segment. This usually takes place every 2 COPs, with the participation of 80 ministers and other high-level representatives. So the presentation will start with the outcomes of the 17th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to the Basel Convention. As mentioned by Rolf, one of the highlights of the meeting was the adoption of a new Annex 4 to the Convention. So the current text goes back to 1989, and a process was launched to revise the Annex 4 to make sure to enhance its legal clarity. So the new Annex 4 on disposal operations will replace entirely the current Annex 4, and it will enter into force on the 1st of January 2030. In the meantime, meaning in the lead up to that date, some work was mandated to look at the consequential implications of those amendments to make sure that once it enters into force, parties will be really equipped at the operational level to implement the change. Going forward, the expert working group on the review of annexes will be focusing its attention on the review of annexes 1 and 3. So on hazardous constituents, hazardous waste streams, and hazardous characteristics. Now, on the technical guidelines, the Conference of the Parties adopted 4 new, updated technical guidelines on the ESM of POPs waste, setting more protective threshold values for POPs waste destruction. Further work was also mandated and is continuing regarding the development of technical guidelines on other wastes, lead-acid batteries, other batteries, tires, and mercury. A new area of work was launched by the COP on used textile and textile wastes. This will start with a call for comments from parties regarding trade in used textile and textile waste, including their management and how these issues could be addressed under the convention. The first substantive consideration of this new area of work will take place during OEWG 15. Regarding plastic wastes, the Secretariat is to prepare a report, again based on information transmitted by parties and others, on the implementation, impacts, and possible challenges of the plastic waste amendments adopted in 2019. The Secretariat is also asked to continue to support parties in capacity building, technical assistance, and technology transfer in relation to the implementation of the plastic waste amendments. Looking at strategic matters, the COP adopted a new strategic framework for the period 2025-2031. It has a set of goals with indicators to measure progress on the different pillars of the convention. There will be at each COP a review of information based on a report prepared by the Secretariat, but the final evaluation will take place at COP 22. Regarding the prior informed consent procedure and the work that is being undertaken to improve the functioning of the PIC procedure, the COP adopted 30 recommendations put forward by the SIWG, the Small Interinstitutional Working Group, and also agreed that this group will consider its work to look at further possible options to improve the functioning of the PIC procedure. Turning to legal and compliance matters, the COP approved a range of recommendations from the Implementation and Compliance Committee to improve implementation and compliance with a range of obligations from national reporting, illegal traffic, the developing of a legislation, among others. And it also adopted guidance documents on how individual parties can integrate actions to address their needs under the Convention into their United Nations Sustainable Development Cooperation frameworks. So this is the first step that was taken by the COP to better embed the implementation of the Convention into this broader framework to achieve the SDGs, which are the cooperation frameworks. The COP had also adopted the work program for the next biennium for the committee, 26-27. Regarding cooperation with the WCO on the harmonized system, this is ongoing work undertaken, guided by the parties and of course through cooperation with the WCO. The COP invited comments on a draft proposal to amend the codes for slag, ash, and residues containing selenium and tellurium, and also is relying on parties to provide suggestions on new types of Basel Convention waste, which should be proposed for inclusion in the HS. On national reporting, several streams of work under this item. The first one is the revision to Table 9 of the reporting format, which is to be used by parties to transmit information on confirmed cases of illegal traffic. So Table 9 is being revised with a view to facilitating the transmission of such information by parties. And this new format is now being consulted with all parties and will then go back to OEWG and COP for possible adoption. Also, the COP requested the development of practical guidance on inventories of biomedical and healthcare waste. This would be done by the Secretariat and then go back to the COP. And the COP requested that the Secretariat continue to further develop the electronic system for reporting. Regarding a work stream, which is linked with the work on improving the PIC procedure, it's a specific aspect of improving implementation of this procedure through exploring the possible electronic approaches to the notification and movement documents. The COP requested the group to continue to be further advanced, particularly regarding options for national and regional solutions. National experts were invited to share experience in developing software in trade and customs areas and in the PIC procedure, and to also participate in the SIWG, so the Small Intersessional Working Group. Regarding e-waste, the COP agreed to the updates to 11 technical guidelines, guidance, and fact sheets reflecting the e-waste amendments. So the e-waste amendments entered into force on the 1st of January 2025, and the COP had launched some work to make sure that existing technical guidance and guidance documents reflected those e-waste amendments. So it's consequential changes. So this has now been completed for a whole set of 11 documents. But in addition to that, the COP saw the need to develop guidance to help parties classify e-waste into 3 entries, so in Annex 2, in Annex 8, and Annex 9, so as to help with the implementation of the application of the PIC procedure to transboundary movements of e-waste. So this guidance the development of this guidance was entrusted to the expert working group, which has been working until now on the guidance on to distinguish e-waste and used electronic equipment. And this group will now turn its attention to the development of this new guidance, which is very much needed by parties. Regarding wastes containing nanomaterials, the Secretariat was requested to raise awareness on activities aimed at addressing issues related to such wastes. Turning now to the partnerships. So there are 4 partnerships under the Basel Convention, which operate under the cluster of the partnership program. And the COP reviewed progress achieved by those 4 partnerships. As you know, the distinct feature of those partnerships is that the working group, which is the body operating the partnerships, brings together not only parties, but also observers to the convention, and these operate on equal footing within the framework of those partnerships. So the COP adopted the work programs and work plans of the 3 of the partnerships, so phase 2, household waste partnership and plastic waste partnership, but it also looked at outcomes of the work of those partnerships over the biennium. In relation to phase 2, following consideration of guidance documents on televisions, screens, audio and video equipment, as well as on refrigerators and cooling and heating equipment, the COP requested that the work continue. And these guidance documents look at repair and refurbishment of those electronic materials, but also at the environmentally sound management of their wastes. So this work will continue. In relation to Enforce, the COP elected 2 new parties and 2 new regional centers as members of Enforce, and entrusted Enforce to continue its work on preventing and combating illegal traffic. And looking at the household waste partnership, the COP welcomed the overall guidance documents that was developed on the ESM of household waste. And just to note that this guidance and the work of the partnership has been working, for instance, on textile waste until now. So this will feed in the new stream of work that was launched by the COP. The OEWG brings together all these streams of work. So the work program was adopted for 26-27, and OEWG will meet in Geneva on the week of 22 to 26, 2026 to June 2026 to take stock of all the progress achieved intersessionally by all the various groups. And this completed the overview of the Basel COP17. Now turning to the Rotterdam Convention COP12. In terms of main achievements, the COP listed 2 chemicals. So it had 10 chemicals before it for consideration and possible inclusion in Annex 3, 4 new chemicals and 6 returning chemicals. And it is among those 6 returning chemicals that the COP reached consensus on the listing of the 2 following chemicals, carbosulfan as a pesticide, and then fenthion as a severely hazardous pesticide formulation. And that's the proof that it's worthwhile to work long and hard and finally to achieve the inclusion of those chemicals in the Annex 3 to the Convention. These 2 amendments will enter into force on the 22nd of October 2025. When it comes to the other 8 chemicals, these conclusion of consideration of the consideration was not completed. Therefore, their inclusion in Annex 3 will be deferred, has been deferred to the next COP. The COP also reviewed the work undertaken by the Compliance Committee and adopted the committee's work program for 26-27. The COP also gave a lot of attention to this work on enhancing the effectiveness of the convention. It adopted a decision which recognizes that the Rotterdam Convention subjects chemicals listed in Annex 3 to the PIC procedure, but does not prescribe bans. The COP also initiated several activities to continue to enhance the Convention's effectiveness. These look into sharing of information on resources and tools available to assist parties to implement chemical management systems, the provision of additional training to current and incoming members of the Chemical Review Committee, the CRC, something new, which is the invitation to the joint meeting on pesticide management of FAO and WHO to discuss the use of Annex 3 as a criterion for defining highly hazardous pesticides under criterion 6 of the guidelines on hazardous HHP, highly hazardous pesticides, on the International Code of Conduct on Pesticides Management. So this is a way to bring together these 2 streams of work, the work under the Convention and the impact of listing a chemical in Annex 3, and this guidance of FAO and WHO. The COP also requested the sharing of information between parties on provisions under the Convention that may be relevant for quality standards for agriculture and food production, and also requested the Secretariat, subject to the availability of resources, to translate in the 6 UN languages the Chemical Review Committee Handbook. Regarding the operation of the Chemical Review Committee, the COP appointed 15 new members of the committee with terms of office from the 1st of May 26 to the 30th of April 2030, requested CRC 21, so this fall, to identify an interim chair of the committee, and the COP will consider electing this interim chair as chair of the committee at its next meeting, so COP 13. The COP also requested the Secretariat to continue to implement training activities for new and existing members, mirroring the decision I just mentioned on enhancing the effectiveness of the Convention. Regarding the status of implementation, the COP basically decided to continue implementation of past decisions, decisions 7.2, 9.1, and 11.1, and also asked the Secretariat to streamline the exercise of requesting and collecting information from parties, because the Compliance Committee as well undertakes this kind of information collection, and it asked the Secretariat to make sure that these efforts are streamlined so as to ease the burden on parties. Turning now to the Stockholm Convention and the 12th meeting of the Conference of the Parties, in terms of main outcomes, this includes the listing in Annex to the convention with specific exemptions of 3 chemicals or persistent organic pollutants now that they've been listed in the convention, the pesticide chlorpyrifos, and also 2 complex groups of industrial chemicals, long-chain PHCAs and medium-chain chlorinated paraffins. Regarding UV328, the COP had at its last meeting listed this chemical in Annex A with specific exemptions, and this amendment entered into force in February 2025. And at this COP, COP 12, the COP decided to amend the listing in Annex A by adding a new specific exemption to the listing regarding the use of water sealant tape and adhesives for the aircraft industry. This decision to amend the listing in Annex A was complemented, and both decisions were gavelled at the same time, given the interlinkages between the 2 decisions, by a decision accompanying the amendment. This decision accompanying the amendment includes, for instance, the possibility of provisional application of the amendment, and it's also coupled with a strong urging by the COP for parties to avoid putting forward these proposals to amend a listing following its review by the COP Review Committee. In terms of the exemptions, the COP noted that no new registrations are possible for several specific exemptions related to BDEs and polychlorinated naphthalines. And it also decided, and this is a first in the history of the convention, it decided to agree to the request by one party to extend specific exemptions for PFOA and PFOS for use in firefighting foam for 4 years, so only until the 2nd of June 2030. Looking at other POPs and continuing the work related to several of them on PCB, the COP urged parties to take measures to meet their obligations in view of the 2025-2028 deadlines. It welcomed updated guidance for the development of inventories on PCB and the strategy developed for parties to help parties to meet the 2025-2028 goals. And it welcomed the approval of the global PCB program by the GEF Council, which is also a landmark development in terms of the promoting the implementation of the convention and helping parties achieve those deadlines under the convention. On DDT, the COP reviewed the progress achieved toward the elimination of DDT and agreed that there is a continued need for the use of DDT for malaria vector control, that this is justified, but only in a few specific settings. As there are still several parties in the DDT register, the COP requested the Secretariat to continue the intersessional process of consultations with those parties on a possible phase-out plan for DDT and to invite them to consider that they withdraw from the DDT register. So this is a work that has been ongoing and will be again considered by the next COP to see how much progress has been done. Regarding BDEs, the COP conducted an evaluation of the progress made by parties towards eliminating BDEs contained in articles and formulated several recommendations, again, to help parties in implementing their obligations. Regarding the compliance committee, so the compliance committee, the first cohort of members of the committee were elected by the COP, and the COP also adopted the inaugural work program of the committee for 26-27, which means that you have now, for the first time under the 26-27 biennium, 3 compliance committees working to support parties with the implementation of the 3 conventions. Among the other outcomes of the COP, COP 12, in relation to guidelines and guidance on BAT and BEP, the COP welcomed 4 guidance on BAT and BEP related to the newly listed POPs. or POPs contaminated sites, updated sections of the patent guidance on unintentional POPs, as well as conclusions and recommendations of the toolkit and the patent BEP experts. The experts have been requested to continue their work, including the review and update of guidance according to the work plan, which was developed by the experts and reviewed by the COP. Turning to POPs wastes, the COP welcomed the adoption by PC COP 17 of the 4 updated or new technical guidelines on POPs waste and mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. And it also invited the Basel Convention appropriate bodies to update relevant technical guidelines to reflect the newly listed POPs by SC COP 12, so the 3 new POPs listed in Annex A. Regarding national implementation plans, the COP took notes of the guidance on inventories and alternatives for newly listed POPs, the online course on NIPS and the Stockholm Convention, and electronic templates for reporting quantitative and qualitative information in NIPS and in the national reports, inviting comments thereon by the 31st of October 2025. The COP also requested the Secretariat to develop new guidance on inventories and alternatives to POPs listed by the COP 12. And we're getting to the end. Regarding the operations of the POPs Review Committee, and just as it elected the new members of the CRC, it appointed 15 new committee members with terms of office from the 5th of May 26 to the 4th of May 2030. Just like in the case of the CRC, the POPROC was invited to identify an interim chair, and COP 13 will look at electing this chair. The COP also welcomed the report on options for identifying POPs in stockpiles, products and articles in use and in waste, and requested to maintain cooperation with other bodies, Basel Convention, Rotterdam Convention, GFC, Minamata, INC, IOMC, Montreal Protocols, all those entities that are also involved in the work pertaining to any POPs on the issue of POPs in stockpiles, products and articles, inviting them to consider the report above. Looking now at the financial mechanisms, so the COP requested that the Secretariat transmit to the GEF Council the report on funding needs for the Convention's implementation for the 4 years 26 to 2030, the report on the 6th review of the financial mechanism, the report on further options for addressing the needs, including funding needs, and challenges met to reach the targets related to the elimination of PCBs, together with the guidance to the financial mechanism. So all this now reviewed by the COP will go to the GEF for further consideration and, of course, including the context of the GEF 9 replenishment. On reporting, the COP decided that the 6 national reports should be submitted by the 31st of August 2026, and the COP requested that the Secretariat update the National Reporting Questionnaire to reflect the newly listed POPs under the Convention in Annex A. Regarding the effectiveness evaluation, so the launch of the 3rd evaluation of the effectiveness has been done. We're already at the last meeting with the plan that was agreed on the way forward. The members of the committee will only be elected by the next COP, but the Secretariat was already asked to undertake the preparatory work to allow the committee to already be ready to operate when it comes into operation. And so a preliminary report has to be developed by the Secretariat to facilitate the 3rd evaluation of the effectiveness. This has to be made available by the 31st of January 2028. Regarding the global monitoring plan for effectiveness evaluation, the COP requested the regional organization groups and the global coordination group to continue their work and to present the fourth regional monitoring reports at COP13, and this will feed in, of course, in this third review of the effectiveness of the convention. The COP also encouraged parties to consider regional strategies and the recommendations set out in the GAMP meeting reports, and to engage actively in the implementation of the global monitoring plan and the effectiveness evaluation exercise. Now, turning to the joint issues, as I mentioned at the outset, a couple decisions were adopted by the three conference of the parties. If they're not substantively word for word the same, they reflect the same idea. There's sometimes some elements that are only relevant to one or two of the conventions, but overall they reflect the three COPs moving along in the same direction. One decision that is of importance, of course, to the work of the convention is the adoption of the program of work and budgets for the next biennium, and with a very much welcome increase of about 4.12% in the budget. And this includes, for example, consideration that the work of the convention has expanded with new mandates entrusted to the secretariats. The COP have agreed to strengthen mandates for the secretariats under its international cooperation mandate, both with the Minamata Convention, but also with a range of other organizations and entities, UNEP, the INC on plastic pollution, OEWG on Science Policy Panel, the Global Framework on Chemicals, the Montreal Protocol, CBD, UNFCCC, IMO when it comes to the Hong Kong Convention, WCO, but also the Bamako and Waigani Conventions, which are two regional conventions complementing the Basel Convention. Under technical assistance, the three COPs took note of the technical assistance needs of developing countries and parties with economies in transition, and it welcomed the new technical assistance plan for the next 4 years, 26 to 29, encouraging all relevant actors that have a mandate to support parties with the implementation of the conventions to take it into account when undertaking their own activities. The COPs also emphasized the key role of regional centers under the Basel and Stockholm Conventions in delivering technical assistance and promoting technology transfer for the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions implementation. Other decisions under joint issues include the synergies in combating illegal traffic and trade in hazardous chemicals and wastes, the development of a resource mobilization strategy from non-state actors, which would focus and benefit parties in the two regions, Africa region and Latin America and the Caribbean. And this strategy will be built on the basis of output provided by parties in those two regions. Also, a decision on science to action, continuing the work, clearinghouse mechanism, the same. And for the venue and dates of the next COPs, the three COPs welcomed and accepted the offer from the government of Panama to welcome the next COPs in Panama City from the 19th to the 30th of April 2027, and requested the Secretariat to make the necessary arrangements by entering a host country agreement with the party, with Panama, to enable the meetings to take place in Panama City. And this completes the technical work outcomes, and I'm pleased to hand over to Mark-Christina. Thank you for the high-level segment.
Thank you very much, Juliette, and I'll continue with the presentation that Juliette was delivering. And so for the So the high-level segment of the meetings of the conferences of the parties to the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions took place over the 30th of April and the 1st of May. It had a one-day duration. It started in the afternoon of April the 30th and finished on the morning of 1st of May. We had over 80 ministers and other high-level representatives attending the meetings. It included also representatives from IGOs and heads of MEAs. The outcomes of the high-level segment are the meeting report and a compilation of key messages that emerged from the ministerial discussions held over the 2 days. The ministers and other high-level representatives participated very actively in both roundtable discussions and panel discussions held over the 2 days. In addition to that, they also participated in other related high-level segment events that were organized by the INC Secretariat for the plastics negotiations, as well as the Global Framework on Chemicals, a lunch that was held on the second day. And all of these discussions contributed also to the key messages. We have also highlighted that the high-level participants reiterated their commitment to the implementation of the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions, and highlighted the very important key role that the conventions play in addressing pollution, biodiversity, loss, and climate change. With this, I'll just pass on to Juliette with the last follow-ups slide.
Yes, thank you very much, Maria Cristina. And last but not least, but what are we? We already launched the follow-up work to the COPs. So we have already made available on the conventions the advanced unedited version of the decisions adopted by the 3 COPs. So this is in English only, and you have the URL here on the slide. There have been a number of calls for information by the COPs in the various decisions. So follow-up letters with the calls for either nominations to participate in groups or the invitation of comments or views in follow-up to the adoption of the decisions will be sent out this week to the 3 under the 3 conventions and will be made available on the convention's websites. So that will keep you busy over the summer. Some of the calls for information are to be submitted to the secretariat by the end of August, by the end of September. So we look forward to receiving these so that this would inform the work of the secretariat going forward, as well as the work of the various subsidiary bodies under the 3 conventions. So coming up soon. And then in complement to this current webinar, we have scheduled other webinars to be held online exclusively for parties and other stakeholders around the world. There will be one on Tuesday, the 10th of June in French from 10 to 11 a.m. And then we will have the next on Thursday, the 12th of June, one in English from 11 to 12, and one in Spanish from 4 to 5 p.m. And during these webinars, the same information will be shared with everyone. And I think this completes our presentation. Thank you, Rolf.
Thank you very much, Juliette and Maria Cristina, for this detailed presentation. I now open the floor for questions. I already have 2 questions in the chat, which I will respond to. And this first one, any specific activities ongoing with other convention or frameworks, such as the Global Framework on Chemicals? Just to highlight that the Global Framework on Chemicals doesn't fall under the purview of the BRS Secretariat. It falls under the purview of UNEP under the Chemicals and Health branch. And just to inform you that they will have their open-ended working group in Uruguay at the end of June from the 24th to the 27th of June in Punta del Este. But that said, we also had a couple of sessions of the Global Framework on Chemicals. We had a special session hosted by the government of Germany and the IOMC during the high-level segment. And we have the outcomes of this session. So it was a ministerial session. And I think as well, we had some side events as well related to the Global Framework on Chemicals during our COPs. The second question is concerning the Household Waste Partnership and also whether we can have a waste pickers partnership. As you know, the partnerships are established by the Conference of the Parties under the Basel Convention. So any future partnerships will need to be discussed, negotiated by the next Conference of the Parties. That said, we do have a representation of waste pickers under the Plastic Waste Partnership, and they are engaged already. And we've worked with a number of with speaker organizations around the world in advancing their work. So if you'd like to have more information, I invite you to connect with us and we will share relevant information on how we engage with speakers. I would also like to say that back to the framework on chemicals, there'll be an event tomorrow on the open-ended working group. So that will be at, maybe Diana, you can say a few words about this one.
Yes, tomorrow at 2 p.m. we are going to have an online briefing on the Open and Working Group to establish the science policy platform on chemicals, waste, and on preventing pollution. So it's part of the package of briefings we have been organizing in preparation of the Punta del Este meetings, as we call them, as there are 3 important moments that will be taking place next month, that you mentioned, Rolf, in Punta del Este. And for who is online, the link has been shared in the chat and it's available here on the screen. And
thank you very much, Diana. And of course, if you go to the GEN website, you'll find everything and all the information there. So I will now open the floor for any questions from colleagues joining us here in the Environment House first.
gentlemen,
Yes, sir.
you need to put the microphone with us.
Hello. Yes, thank you very much for your presentation. I had a question. I would like to just understand what happened with the BRS Secretariat's work that was feeding into the plastic treaty negotiations. I read in the report that there was some discussion about the exact terminology, so perhaps you could share more information about that.
Thank you very much, Juliet. Can I pass this one to you?
Yes, so, well, in a nutshell, the mandate that was provided to the Secretariat is to continue its cooperation and information sharing. So we will continue to participate, and to do that, we actually just now are preparing an information a contribution through an information document to INC 5.2. We will also be participating in INC 5.2, a delegation with Rolf, with Kay, and myself and another colleague, so as to make sure that also the outcomes of the BRS COPs when it comes to plastic waste feed in also and are brought to the attention of the negotiators. So the COP decision, I mean, you can find it already on the website in this advanced version of the decision, so you can see what our parties decided. But in terms of the mandates given to the Secretariat, it's the same mandate. So yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Juliet. Just to add that, some of the chemicals listed under the Stockholm Convention are chemicals that are used in plastics. So that work will continue ongoing. So the work has not subsided, or the work will continue. And as you rightly said, Juliet, there's a lot of linkages, first with the Stockholm Convention when it comes to chemicals in plastics, but also on the Basel when we're dealing with plastic waste. So that work will continue, and of course we will be supporting the inter-negotiating process for the new treaty on plastic waste. Just taking the physical questions first. For persons present here in person. Okay, I don't see anyone. Okay, we'll now move back to online. Let me see. Okay, it's coming.
It's a question from Romania on is there any plan to solve the problem with the nominations in the Bureau, another group, the issue you had at the end?
Thank you very much for that question. Indeed, there was no decision taken at the COPs concerning nominations for the Eastern European region. We are having ongoing discussions, and we will provide any feedback later on, but there are ongoing discussions. Thank you. Okay, I see no further questions from the floor and from online. So I would like to personally thank you, and on behalf, of course, of the BRS Secretariat, and to thank the GEN for organizing this briefing. Thank you so much to you and your staff. I would also like to highlight that the GEN was very active during our COPs as well, engaging and supporting us. So I'd like to say a special thank you, Diana, to you and your team for supporting us during the COPs as well. So with those few words, I wish you a wonderful day and thank you for your attention. And I would like now to, before I close, to hand over to Diana for some announcements. Thank you.
Yes, indeed, Ralph. I want first to highlight that we really enjoy to be at your COPs. We always enjoy, but I think that this round was really very exciting for all of us. I would like to remind everybody that next week we are celebrating World Environment Day on the 5th of June, and of course, the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Convention Secretary will be represented at this important celebration because they play an important role on moving forward the agenda on beating plastic pollution, which is the theme again of this year's World Environment Day. Here in Geneva, we are having a big event in building number 2 with a forum organized in parallel to a breakfast offered by the host country, where we will showcase of all the actors of International Geneva what they do to move forward this agenda, and it's going to be followed by a dialogue also in preparation, of course, of what is a very important negotiation coming up later this year, which you referred to earlier, which is the Plastics Treaty, the establishment of this Plastics Treaty, which round of negotiations will be taking place in Geneva in August. So there will be a lot happening in Geneva also in the run-up to that important negotiation. Thank you for...
Thank you very much, Diana, for this additional information. And as mentioned by her, everything is on the GEN website. You can have all the information, links, and how to engage and to participate. So with those few words, I would like to thank you all once again and have a great day. This meeting is now closed. Thank you.